Hello everyone, this is Darko 2012 from Global Government News. I'm covering an article that was posted on Infowars.com titled U.S. Border Thugs Violently Attack Award-nominated San Francisco Author. I'm going to read the entire story. You can turn the volume down if you want to read it yourself. Recently there's been an apparent increase in police brutality and the coercive use of force by government around the world. There have been several high-profile cases of Canadians held behind foreign borders, facing imprisonment and malicious prosecution. The Canadian government has been slow to act in these cases, or sometimes even actively supports their detention. While many of the recent cases have involved war-torn or developing countries, this is not always so. I was recently alerted to a worrying situation involving a Toronto resident attempting to re-enter Canada at the Sarnia Port Huron border crossing. On December 9th, St. Lawrence Neighbourhood resident Dr. Peter Watts, a Hugo Award-nominated science fiction writer, was traveling from the U.S. back into Canada. According to varied reports, U.S. Border Patrol guards stopped him before he reached the Canadian border to search his vehicle. When he exited the car to ask why he was being searched, the situation rapidly escalated. Watts says he was, quote, punched in the face, pepper sprayed, shit-kicked, handcuffed, thrown wet, and half naked into a holding cell for 3 effing hours, thrown into an even colder jail cell overnight, arraigned, and charged with assaulting a federal officer, all without access to legal representation. Although they did try to get me to waive my Miranda rights twice. Eventually he was released on the Canadian side of the border, but U.S. Border Patrol impounded his vehicle and retained all his personal belongings, including his computer and jacket. He now faces a felony charge for, quote, assaulting a federal officer. The U.S. Border Patrol alleges that Watts choked an officer during the altercation. Watts insists that he was innocent, and he has a witness and video footage in his defense. The video has not been publicly released due to the pending trial. While the details and final outcome of this case are still unknown, it highlights an issue that is of great growing importance: the defense of Canadians abroad by their government. Unlike other recent cases, in this instance there are no questions of identity fraud or terrorist activity. Watts is a respected author who had briefly traveled to Nebraska to help his friend move. Says here he was leaving the U.S. when the U.S. Border Services began their inspections. He is now facing substantial fines and a possible 2-year prison sentence. Support for Watts has come from a variety of sources. Donations to his legal defense have been pouring in from other members of the public. Despite considerable moral and financial support he has received from the public, there has been no support from the federal government. Regardless of skin color or gender, regardless of destination or duration abroad, all Canadian citizens deserve the protection of their government abroad. One of these reasons for the modern diplomatic system of consulates and embassies is to offer protection and aid to Canadians traveling abroad. It is imperative that we as Canadians not allow such protections to be eroded or weakened. I urge the Government of Canada to take strong stand in the defense of all Canadians. The Minister of Immigration should investigate the abuse of Dr. Watts' rights. In an age where fear and coercion are increasingly the tools of all states, we as Canadians must be able to trust our government to defend our rights when unfairly harassed. To support Dr. Watts, it says down here you can contact him down here, and it has his phone number. If you're wanting to support him. I just thought I'd cover this story because I remember hearing about Alex Jones actually being detained up there by the Canadian police, by the Canadian border control people. And I just wanted to say that I've actually the last time I've been over the border, I had to cross the border, was I was in the military crossing over in Yuma, Arizona to Mexico. But I personally haven't been crossing borders too much. I've never been over the Canadian border, so I personally don't know how it is. But when I was coming, one of my friends who was a resident alien, I guess you can consider him, but he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was in the Marine Corps, and he had his military ID and whatnot and all his papers, but he didn't have his resident alien card when coming back into the U.S. and Arizona, just for going the day over in Mexico. And they wouldn't let him in. He basically had to have someone come bring him his card. to help take care of that. So they're at the border. They're harder. It's harder to get through if you're a freaking resident or if you're in the military than it is if you're a legal resident. That's my personal experience with it. You know, it's not a lot, but um, I think that kind of goes in line with what, you know, theoretically the North American Union is, which is a borderless, right? It's borderless for people who who travel legally, or but for the people that are citizens, they just kind of mess with them to, I don't know for what reasons, just to keep them in check and let them know that they're now slaves or what. But it's just harder to travel everywhere now, unless you're traveling illegally. And then the last thing I just wanted to say was that how everybody is pretty much considered guilty, and then you have to prove yourself innocent. And it seems like that's how the not the legal system, but just the way law enforcement and government representatives and agencies and law enforcement kind of deal with citizens nowadays, is they just kind of assume that you're guilty, and if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about, and you just kind of prove yourself wrong. But for all those people that don't have money, it's kind of hard to be defending yourself constantly when you don't have any money to have good legal counsel, especially when you're going against the state. Um, they have, if the state will have good prosecutors but bad defendants. So if you need a defense attorney and you can't afford one, you're going to get one from the state, and of course it's going to be a crappy one. But when it comes to prosecuting, the government prosecutor is a-okay. He's very good at what he does, and that's just the way it goes. So I don't like the system, and that's all I wanted to say about it.